We must increase vaccinations among the unvaccinated with new vaccination requirements.
If you don't want to get vaccinated, that's your choice. But don't think you can get on a plane or a train besides vaccinated people and put them at risk.
Normalcy only returns when we've largely vaccinated the entire global population.
Nobody will be safe if not everybody is vaccinated.
We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin. This is not about freedom or personal choice. The time for waiting is over. My message to unvaccinated Americans is this: what more is there to wait for? What more do you need to see?
I told you about these vaccines that are coming out. These are terrible vaccines. These are mRNA vaccines.
The push for mandatory vaccines are being rekindled by the unrepentant sponsors and inventors of evil.
CDC director is signing off on a new COVID shot, saying anybody over 6 months should get it. This is the final step in the approval process for this updated shot.
The mRNA vaccines are no solution at all. In essence, these messenger ribonucleic acidic injections are a weaponized bioweapon against humanity. And many more around the world must understand this.
Understanding mRNA COVID-19 vaccines. And they tell you, messenger RNA vaccines, also called mRNA vaccines, are some of the first COVID-19 vaccines authorized for use in the United States. Now remember, this is CDC in the United States. It's the same thing. It's the same thing they've spread around the world, okay? So mRNA vaccines are a new type of vaccine to protect against infectious diseases. To trigger an immune response, many vaccines put a weakened or inactivated germ into our bodies, not mRNA vaccines. Instead, the mRNA vaccines teach our cells how to make a protein or even just a piece of a protein that triggers an immune response inside our bodies. That immune response, which produces antibodies, is what protects us from getting infected if the real virus enters our bodies. Now, what they're telling you is very interesting, okay? Now, they come here and they tell you something. mRNA vaccines do not use the live virus that causes COVID-19. Then, it says they do not affect or interact with our DNA in any way. Okay, let me tell you what it does. It makes your DNA editable. What are we saying? They're telling you that your DNA will not be affected. But how about making it editable? They didn't say that. And that's the thing we are saying is the problem. It makes your DNA changeable, so you can be modified. This is what the mRNA does to you. This thing is not a vaccine. It's a gene therapy. Here is a sentence from an NIAID, that's Fauci's organization, press release that mentions one of several research approaches. Listen to this. The NIAID Vaccine Research Center scientists have initiated phase 1, phase half, 1/2, studies of a universal flu vaccine strategy that includes, this is interesting, that includes an investigational DNA. This is from the Dr. Fauci's organization when they released it in 2018. Here's what it says. This vaccine strategy includes an investigational DNA-based vaccine called a DNA prime. Are you following this? It refers to what the experts are touting as the next generation of immunizations. Instead of injecting a piece of a virus into a person in order to stimulate the immune system, synthesized genes will be shot into the body. This isn't traditional vaccine or vaccination anymore. It's gene therapy. Look at that again. The synthetic gene is incorporated into the recipient's own DNA. That is a permanent alteration of the human DNA. And that is a permanent change to your personality. This was 2018. 2018. They boasted about it. What they are denying now, they boasted about it then.
COVID jabs, mRNA vaccines, when they have been labelled as gene therapy, the fact checkers have come out and said, no, this is not true. For example, here in Forbes, mRNA vaccines are not gene therapy. The World Health Summit, with speakers from the World Health Organization, United Nations. Here we see Minister of Health, Germany, Ursula, European Commission, Tedros, Director General of the WHO, and loads of big pharma boffins and CEOs, including this fella, Stefan Ulrich, member of the Board of Management and Head of Pharmaceuticals Division, Bayer AG, Germany. Bayer being one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world and involved with the mRNA jabs, okay? So let's see what he said at this World Health Summit.
And for us, therefore, we're really taking that leap, us as a company, Bayer, in cell and gene therapy, which to me is one of these examples where really we're going to make a difference, hopefully, moving forward. There's some, ultimately, the mRNA vaccines are an example for that cell and gene therapy. I always like to say, if we had surveyed 2 years ago in the public, would you be willing to take gene or cell therapy and inject it into your body, we would have probably had a 95% refusal rate. I think this pandemic has also opened many people's eyes to innovation in the way that was maybe not possible before.
It was planned, and they can't deny that now. So if you think if you got vaccinated, then life will be okay. It's never going to be okay, because what they want, I want to tell you plainly again, what they want is total control, but the control is not enough. A change of your personality to the new man, the new person they want to create. They're going to substantially change your life.
What is mRNA? mRNA is a messenger ribonucleic acid. The injection delivers a synthetic, inorganic molecule that programs your cells to synthesize pathogens that your immune system will constantly have to fight off for the rest of your life. Your immune system has a limit to what it can handle. Say you're allergic to gluten and also allergic to pollen. A little gluten and you're okay, a little exposure to pollen and you're okay, but too much of one or a combination of both and your allergies flare up. Your immune system simply caps out. More than just allergies, the same happens with infections. Being injected with an mRNA designed to always create a virus in your system can eventually cause your immune system to become overwhelmed and more vulnerable to other diseases. This is otherwise known as antibody-dependent enhancement or immunodeficiency. This makes attributing a death to the vaccine even less likely in the future, as the cause of death will be reported as the various other diseases the patient died from because the mRNA injection is capping out their natural immune system. The more injections you receive, the worse the problem will become. As it turns out, what we learned from the mRNA data obtained by a Freedom of Information Act request is that within 48 hours of receiving the injection, the toxic proteins are carried throughout your body, including going so far as penetrating the blood-brain barrier, something even a virus can't do. This injected toxic compound accumulates in the brain, the heart, and it shows to have infested other critical organs throughout. Even according to the FDA, the list of possible adverse outcomes are extensive and severe. These deaths and injuries are already being reported, but rarely by the mainstream media.
In speaking about vaccines, did you ever study the history of vaccines? I did. Did you? Did you ever do a research on vaccines to even know what they are at all? And I've told you that the current mRNA vaccines are not really vaccines. They're using the generic terminology. The scientific definition is completely different. So when you're told it's a vaccine, there is a deception in it.
It turns out that the mRNA that's being injected into people is not that. In fact, specifically what it does is it takes a little computer-simulated strand of mRNA, it sends it into the body, and the body becomes a biological weapons factory. It manufactures spike protein. The injection does not stimulate any immunity. It actually is the instructions to make a scheduled pathogen. We have a decade of data that shows us that mRNA actually can transcribe into DNA. Using the term vaccination was intended to essentially mislead the public.
You know, here in BC, we've got more than 90% of the population vaccinated. And yet the COVID numbers haven't changed. They're still having COVID outbreaks where they have fired all the unvaccinated people. So they've got all of these COVID outbreaks occurring in places where there's no unvaccinated people. You would think that anyone with half a brain would realize this is not working.
It is now common knowledge that the mRNA vaccines don't work as a form of protection for the vaccinated. Another lie that has been perpetrated by the proponents and purveyors of these vaccines is the fact that the vaccines stay localized in the site of the injection. On the contrary, that's a wild fallacy.
Normally vaccines just stay in your arm, but there had been a study done in mice in Japan that showed that these shots went intravenous. Pfizer had kept it in Japanese, and until Dr. Byron Bridle had it translated into English, nobody knew about this.
What we do know for sure, what is not speculation, is this vaccine spreads throughout the body.
These little lipid nanocapsules that the Pfizer and Moderna shots are in were designed to be able to go to every part of your body. You're mainlining this vaccine, and 75% of it goes intravenous.
And it's not localized like they lied and said that it stays localized in the area where the jab was done. But it's not true. It circulates in the body. In fact, recent reports showed that mRNA was found in breast milk.
The mRNA does not stay in the muscular area. It's injected intramuscular. This research confirms it does not stay in the place where it's injected. Now, normally there are biodistribution studies that evaluate where these nanoparticles are carried in lipid carriers throughout the body and in excretions as well. But those studies were limited, they were skipped. Many of the findings that were done in the limited studies were concerning. There was no follow-up. We know this from the FOIA documents. Many experts I talked to are concerned about interactions with other child vaccines. Kids get a lot of vaccines before they're 6 months of age. And when you give a vaccine to a woman who's pregnant, it causes general body inflammation. And that's well known to be deleterious in pregnancy. General body inflammation has risks in pregnancy. That's been well studied. If a woman has some inflammation from periodontal inflammation of their gums, then that is associated with preterm labor. Why do we think this inflammation has no downsides? If they're already immune, what are we doing anyway? And sometimes the women have lymphadenopathy, which means they can't engage in breastfeeding when they're trying to lactate. And I think what's interesting is the authors of this study spun it to say that the vaccine is safe among lactating women. They call them lactating individuals in the study. They studied 11 women, only looked for the mRNA 48 hours later, and then concluded that it's safe in women. You can't make that conclusion from this study. In my opinion, the editors told the authors of the paper, this is how you should conclude. I've had that experience with writing for the top medical journals. I've published hundreds of peer-reviewed articles out of Johns Hopkins, and the editors will often say, you need to write it this way, and then you're in a dilemma. Do you use the profile of the journal to publish the study, or do you retract it over a dispute because a couple editors have a lot of power and control?
While innocent children are subjected to the health-damaging consumption of this poison in breast milk, it goes without saying that the perpetrators of this evil are misanthropes, as they still insist on mandatory vaccinations, in spite of the myriads of vaccine injuries among millions of vaccinated people around the world.
Player down on the court. We'll try to get more information.
Johnson taken out on a stretcher and rushed to local Tallahassee Memorial Hospital. You really need to get vaccinated.
Get vaccinated. They're passing out on the fields, they're passing out in the vehicles, they're passing out in their offices, they're passing out in the shops, and come to find out all those people were vaccinated. With all of these reports, with all of these records, with all of this evidence, they still have the guts to tell the people to get vaccinated. But I've shown you why they can go ahead and tell you to get vaccinated, because they are not being vaccinated.
Dr. Ua Sahin, the CEO of BioNTech, the biotechnology company that worked with Pfizer to develop the world's first COVID vaccine, has admitted on camera that he did not get jabbed with a COVID vaccine. When asked by a German reporter why he wasn't vaccinated, Dr. Sahin became evasive and vaguely claimed that it's illegal for him to get vaccinated, and his company must focus on producing billions of vaccines for others. The revelation that the man who developed the Pfizer vaccine has not been vaccinated himself recalls claims by Bill Gates' former doctor that while Gates pushes vaccines on humanity, he does not allow his own family to get vaccinated.
Allow me personal questions. I know that you're not particularly fond of answering personal questions, but you and your wife, Dr. Tuachi, you play such a central role in the development of the virus. I have heard that you yourself have not taken the vaccine yet. Why not?
So I am legally not allowed to take the vaccine at the moment. We of course consider to make that possible. It is more important for us that our co-workers and partners get vaccinated. So our goal is to produce more than 1.3 billion doses in 2021, and that can only be done if we can really continue to work 24/7 without any interruption. And we need to ensure that we protect the co-workers and our team members from COVID-19 infection, because that would mean interruption and delay.
You're not supposed to get it. That's what y'all said. He said, if you get vaccinated, COVID is over, you're not going to get it. You'll be protected. You're protected. The lie was there all the time.
We were even not allowed to participate in clinical trials because per law it is not possible to include company people into such trials.
Meanwhile, they helped the governments to promote mandatory vaccines, while they themselves were shielded from taking those same vaccines. So they say it's nice, it's okay. But all true scientific records show that the vaccines were never safe. The mRNA vaccines were not created to be used for human beings.
Yeah, we've never used mRNA technology before in humans, skipping all the animal trials and ignoring a lot of the adverse events that are occurring.
All previous attempts to make coronavirus vaccines and gene-based vaccines had not gone well. There was no evidence for their safety, just none.
In the face of this already sinister and injurious work, it gets worse, as this horrible unscientific cure, falsely labeled as vaccines, have been celebrated as noteworthy inventions. What a shame.
And to add insult to this injury, just recently, they gave the Nobel Prize to a co-inventor of the mRNA vaccine.
Their research led to the creation of major vaccines at the peak of the pandemic. And today, 2 scientists have been awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine. The breakthroughs are now being used in the fight against other diseases, including cancer.
Pfizer, BioNTech and Moderna are now household names. The 2 professors behind the technology that made those vaccines possible today presented with one of the most prestigious accolades in the scientific world.
The 2023 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, jointly to Katalin Karikó and Drew Weissman.
A vaccine that has killed and injured people. Well, it lends more credence to what I told you before when I said that those vaccines were actually tested and proved to produce the results that they are producing today. That these results were not a mistake. These injuries are not a mistake. They were intended. And that's why they're giving them an award. Because they gave them what they wanted.
Back in 2018,
Dr. Weissman himself issued a warning about potential mRNA vaccine toxicity that produce a hyperinflammatory response which can trigger thrombosis. Dr. Peter McCullough noted the irony of the timing of this announcement, which coincided with a press release about an upcoming event he's a part of to discuss reports of DNA contamination of the mRNA jabs. And Dr. Peter McCullough joins us now. Dr. McCullough, you know, it's kind of hard to watch, isn't it? These people continue to be rewarded as more people die, and the evidence further solidifies the overwhelming adverse effect of myocarditis. It's a bit like a slap in the face, wouldn't you say?
It's not the first time the Nobel Committee has really basically rewarded a horrible event in history. In 1949, the Nobel Prize was awarded to Ignaz Monitz for frontal lobotomy, which turned out to be a disaster in clinical psychiatry. The procedure made so many people neurologic vegetables, and it was finally abandoned. Just like the Nobel Prize being awarded for this modification of messenger RNA, the messenger RNA has been a disaster in the vaccine program. Do you know now the World Council for Health in 2022, the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons in 2023, myself in the U.S. Senate and European Parliament, we've all called for these vaccines to be removed from the market because they're not safe for human use. So we should not be celebrating the messenger RNA component of the vaccine. You know, ironically, what Carrico and Weissman's discovery is how to make the messenger RNA essentially indestructible in the human body. That's what's leading to so many complications, because we can't shut off the spike protein production, which is causing so much disease and disability.
When they were asking everybody to get vaccinated with the mRNA vaccine, and I told you the reason for the vaccine was because they wanted to get under your skin. It had nothing to do with your health. I told you the vaccine was going to be fake because the idea was not because they wanted to vaccinate you for your health against the virus. I told you the vaccine will not cure, will not prevent infection, will not prevent the spread. So if it didn't prevent the infection, didn't prevent the spread of the infection, didn't cure, what was it for? Why were you being forced to take it? So they can get under your skin, to alter your DNA and make you subject to their control. That's what it's all about.
What we're talking about now is like a second industrial revolution, but the product this time will be humans themselves. We are basically learning to produce bodies and minds. Bodies and minds are going to be, I think, the two main products of the next wave of all these changes. And if you're not part of the revolution fast enough, then you probably become extinct. Once you know how to produce bodies and brains and minds, so cheap labor in Africa or South Asia or wherever, it simply counts for nothing. Again, I think that the biggest question maybe in economics and politics of the coming decades will be what to do with all these useless people. You will be able to produce food to feed everybody. The problem is more what to do with them and how will they find some sense of meaning in life when they are basically meaningless, worthless.
In view of this hideous agenda, and the continual push and intimidation for vaccine compliance, God's people around the world must take a bold stand and courageously refuse to succumb to the pressure of taking these death-induced vaccines, because the dangers once set in motion cannot be reversed.
You say, Pastor Chris, are there no good vaccines? No good vaccines. All vaccines are bad. Bad. These are very important things that we must be warned as God's people. Don't take the vaccine. Don't let them deceive you into it. Don't let them deceive you into it.
He that has an ear, let him hear.